Well, good evening, listeners. You're listening to Lament of Hope blog and podcast, and for those viewing as well. Um, I'm excited today. I've been connected to Elizabeth Ford, who's on today, through a mentor of mine, Leah. Um, and, I was blessed to hear about Elizabeth even before I met her because she, first of all, is the founder and executive director of an organization, BetterALife, which is based in Northern Virginia, and they provide food supplies as well as education and life skills for children and families who are in need, um, which surprisingly, even in Northern Virginia, is a large amount of people. Um, and Elizabeth also has a heart for prison ministry. And so she actually meets with um, ladies in prison and does a Bible study with them, as well as mentors them as well. Um, Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy and I appreciate it.
Well, I thank you so much. I thank you for doing these stories.
Well, Elizabeth, I want to start out because when I was reading your bio on Better Life, what really struck out to me is like you know what it's like to be really hungry.
Yes.
Um, can you, set up for me? I know I mentioned a little bit about your mom was just mentally unstable at the time and you struggled getting meals. Um, what's a vivid memory for you as a kid of being really hungry?
A vivid memory of me being hungry as a kid. Um, there's a lot of them. One of them is I was at school one day and just sitting at the tables at the cafeteria, and I remember everybody was eating in front of me, and I was starving.
Mm.
And at that point, I just felt hopeless. And I remember feeling so hopeless, and I was only maybe about 13 or 14 years old at the time. And it just left such an empty feeling in me. Um, and then other times was most of the time to eat, I went to 7-Eleven and I sat outside of 7-Eleven and I bummed quarters. And so in order to eat, you had to get enough quarters. So it had to be person after person after person, um, asking people. And I did that for many years.
Mm.
And so that is embedded, to know what it's like to be rejected over and over again, to be looked at, looked down at, I guess is the best word for it. And then even to have that look of pity from people who gave. And it wasn't ever very comforting.
Yeah.
But I got the food. So.
When, like for you, did you eat like once a day, once every other day, or was there really no
Um,
pattern to it?
so as long as I got to 7-Eleven that day, then I would typically be able to eat. Because a hot dog was like $1, right, at that point. So I would get enough quarters to get a hot dog. But at night, typically I would not eat. In the morning, for breakfast, it was my mother always had coffee. So she was a coffee and a cigarette lady from New York. So I'd have coffee and a cigarette. Occasionally she had cereal. And so what I would do is I would eat half the cereal bowl and I'd leave half out. And that
Mm.
way when I came home from school, I got to drink the rest of the milk. And so a bowl of cereal was 2 meals for me, is how I would work it out.
Was your mom not working at the time, or why was it that you were not able to have food?
She was working, so she worked at a jewelry counter,
Okay.
at a jewelry store. And but she was very depressed.
Mm.
She had a ton of depression. So just doing day-to-day tasks were a real struggle for her. And so being able to pay the bills, she wouldn't pay the bills properly. We moved about 6 times, just, getting evicted from apartments. And then doing normal paperwork for the schools, everything was stressful to her. And
Okay.
so most of it just didn't get done because she would be overwhelmed.
So she wouldn't go grocery shopping, kind of thing.
No. And the times that we did, like she'd go on to her good moments, we'd walk to the store and get what we could.
Okay.
Um and then but that wasn't very much. It was milk, cereal, but the basics. Um And then other times she just couldn't. So we didn't.
Did you ever like attempt to ask her for money to go get food?
No, she didn't have money.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if she's working at the jewelry counter, it was just the bare minimum,
It was the
basically.
bare minimum. Yeah, there was no money for clothes. Most of the clothes were shared with my friend, my best friend Carrie. We shared everything. And it's actually pretty funny. This Christmas, she found an old picture of us, and I had the sweatshirt top, and she had the sweatshirt bottoms on. So we had a split outfit between the two of us. So everything was shared, and what I
Hmm.
did have was maybe about five shirts. Um, and that was for a good few years before I could get to working to buy my own clothes. It was the same shirts.
How did you feel about your mom as a girl? I mean,
You know, it was really hard. It was a struggle. There's still even a lot of struggles. She's in heaven now, bless her heart. But there's always struggles of not understanding, especially as a kid, you don't understand. And so I just couldn't understand why she couldn't get it together. As an adult, you become aware and you understand depression and you learn more about this.
hmm.
But as a child, you don't understand that. All you know is that she's not doing anything and you wonder why.
Is do you have a memory when you were a kid of like a good memory with your mom that you remember?
I do. So before she got divorced, they divorced her and my father divorced when I was seven,
Okay.
6 or 7. And before the divorce, she was happy. And that was before the depression kicked in. And so she used to sing. She had a beautiful voice. And so she was a singer and played her guitar. And she would always do her hair. The braids would be so tight, we'd be squinching, squinching our eyes, trying to just get some space between how tight the braid was. And then she'd send us off to school because I had a sister that lived with us at the time when my parents were married. After the divorce, she moved with my father, and I stayed with my mother.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
did you it's interesting you say that because that actually similarly happened to me when my parents separated. I stayed with my dad. Well, I guess opposite. I stayed with my dad. My sister went with my mom. Did you miss your dad or miss your family? Or was for you like, okay, being with mom is a safe place and I'd much rather be here than us all together?
I was resentful. I felt like it was because of my father that everything was happening to my mother. She was very quick to blame everything on that situation and on the divorce. So as a child, you automatically believe your parent.
Hmm.
So we didn't have a relationship. I didn't have a relationship with my father until I was 21.
When did that start? Did you initiate it or?
Yeah, I did. So I was pregnant with my first son, and I was like, you know what? I want him to know his family. And I didn't know my dad well, at all because I hadn't really spoken to him since I was around 7 or 8. So I initiated that conversation, and he was waiting. He was so ecstatic. He was ecstatic. So that went really well, and I talk to him, I think, daily at this point now.
Oh, wow. Did you
Hmm.
guys get to talk about your mom and kind of
We
resolve
did, we
things?
do. And even now, with me, especially with me running BetterALife, he's just heartbroken because he didn't know. He didn't know
Oh,
what we were going through. He didn't know the struggles.
yeah.
And so he's constantly heartbroken about it. Um, yeah.
That's interesting. I was going to ask too with Better a Life, do you find that most of the families that you are ministering to are single moms, single parent homes, or?
Most of them, yeah. So I would say about 90% of them are single mom, single homes.
Okay. I was going to, for me, a lot of the hard things I've gone through as a kid will kind of still come back for me and will still be vivid, especially when I'm kind of confronted with somebody else who has gone through something similar or, is struggling through that. And there's still days when it can really get me down sometimes. Um, for you, like, how has that journey been of, okay, I am now a new creation. I've been able to I've gone through this, but it's not who I am. It's my story, so I can share
Yeah.
it with other people. But it doesn't, it's not my identity. When did you how did you grow in that?
I grew through it, I guess is the best way. I was not raised in the church. So I didn't come to know the Lord until I was 30. um,
Okay.
which is phenomenal. I'm just so blessed to know him now. But as a child, I dropped out of high school in ninth grade, the end of my ninth grade year. Got my GED and went right to work, and it was the ways of the world at that point. And so you learn to grow through it. Okay, do I want to be hungry or not? And so you work hard. And I wasn't the kindest person that I wanted to be. I would step on toes if I had to step on toes to just try to make a way for myself. At 19, I found myself homeless again. I was living in a Red Roof Inn, just trying to make it. And so I paid cash day by day there.
Okay.
And so I just kept going. And so you kind of just go through it. And then once I became a Christian in my 30s, that's when I found my peace with it.
When did were you scared being 19 and being on your own?
It was scary. Yeah, it was scary. My mom started kicking me out when I was around 15.
Oh,
And so she'd let me back in, then it kicked me out. It was just back and forth all the time. So finally after that freshman year, I'm like, okay, we're done, dude. We're done. So I stayed with people, and staying with friends was great. You'd have some comfort there because you knew you were in a safe place. I think the hotel was the scariest time because it's all the open doors. It's like a motel, basically, so you've got
yeah.
anybody come knock on your door, and it's loud, and there's just a lot of people that you wouldn't typically want to be around, there. And, for a 19-year-old, it was scary. And, so, sleeping was very light. I didn't sleep well.
Hmm.
And, until I was able to save enough money to, move into my own place.
What did you dream about as a 19-year-old? Like, did you have a goal? Did you want to be or do something that you kind of were hoping would someday happen?
Yeah, I wanted to be an executive. I said, I'm going to reach the top. I want to reach the top of a company, be an executive, and lead things. And I was like, because then in my mind at that point, if I was an executive, I would look like the ladies did at the Reston Town Center, the people that, look like the ones that gave me the money. And that was the image of an executive in my head. As a kid, you don't know what they really are. So the image was what they looked like. And that's what I strived for, to look like that, to have clean clothes, and to have clean hair, and to not feel like, you know, just the stinky old, hungry kid. And
Yeah.
that was my goal.
And those ladies you're talking about, those are the ladies that gave you the money, the quarters at the 7-Eleven?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that them or the gentlemen. The gentlemen were always in suits. The ladies were always dressed to a T, and because I grew up in Reston, so you've got the Reston Town Center area there. And so yeah, it was hard.
When did you meet your husband?
So my husband is actually my second husband.
Oh,
Now my first husband, I was in an abusive marriage for 10 years.
okay.
And so I met him when I was 22, I think, right after my son was born. And so I met him, and he offered the world, the moon, the sky, everything. And I was like, cool, I need that. So I'll take that. And but with that offering came a lot of abuse. So I went through that for 10 years, and came out with three more children. So at this point, I had four kids and was a single mom,
Hmm.
after 10 years. And that was scary. um,
I was gonna
uh,
say, did it remind you of your mom? Kind of
it-
like
so
being a
everything I
single mom.
did in my life, I strive to do the opposite.
Okay.
That's how I coped with, what did she do? Do the opposite. And that's how I learned to move upwards. Don't be stagnant, don't stay, keep moving. And it's got its benefits, its pros and its cons. because then you end up working yourself to bits and,
Right.
you know, um, versus having any type of normalcy at home. But it got me through, and that's what got me through. And so I did that. I went back to college. I went to college, well, not back. I went to college online when I was older, and got my degree in 2014. I graduated with my bachelor's degree, and I did it all with night school. So the kids would go to bed, and I would do school at night.
Oh,
Yeah. Yep.
and work during the day.
And work during the day. Yes.
What? And so you met your second husband around the time you graduated from
Yeah,
college?
yeah, so we
Okay.
were friends at that time. And yeah, so we met at church, which was great. So I met my second husband at church, and he had a former, family as well, divorced, and very similar to my first marriage actually. But he was on the end that I was on, so he struggled too. And so we met, we were friends for a couple of years, and then because I was very untrustworthy, of course, of men. So it took a good
Right.
few years before I mean, it took almost a year before I'd let him in my foyer. It's like, you can't come in, dude. And but everything worked out. We got married in May of 2015, and we've been married ever since.
Wow. So actually, what, 9 years almost?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So you said you came to know the Lord in your 30s. So is that been a was that relatively recent? When was that?
So it was 2009.
Okay.
It's the first time I went to church. And
What
so that
what
was
made
that
you
was
go?
it was actually my mother. Out of all the people, at this point in her life, she had come to know the Lord that year. And so she came down to visit, she was in Florida at the time. I think, no, yes, she'd just come back from Russia. So she had gotten remarried to my stepfather, who was in the Foreign Service. So he took her everywhere. So she was in the Florida at the time. She said she was going to come, but I needed to find a Pentecostal church. I said, I don't know what that is, but I'll look for one. So I found one in the paper. It said the worship center. I'm like, is this one? And she said, that's one. I'm like, okay, we'll go there. And so I had no idea what to expect. I was expecting something like you see on TV with the Catholic churches,
Yeah.
and I went in, and people got their hands up, and they're yelling and they're jumping, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm in crazy world. I was like, she's really lost her mind at this point.
And
So
then
yes,
what?
yeah.
I was gonna say what. So then, how did that spark a relationship with the Lord?
So when the pastor spoke, it literally felt like no one else was in the room but me, and
Mm,
that the entire message was geared toward me.
mm,
And that's what got me curious. It's like, okay, this is weird. It's like, this is just so weird. So I decided to test the waters and go back a few times to see if it would keep happening.
oh wow!
Yeah.
And it
And
did.
it did. So eventually, yeah, just God sunk in real quick. And so yeah, I stayed with that church. And now we're on on my very second church. So after COVID, we decided to transition and grow a little bit, because you have to be fed. And if you're in the same space, even though that space is good, you still got to grow with the Lord. So both of us were in a place where we are like, okay, let's find somewhere where we can grow a little bit more. And so now we're at Free Life Church. But yeah.
Now, had you like forgiven your mom before coming to the Pentecostal church? Because it sounds like you had a relationship with her.
No, so she just came to visit because she wanted to visit.
Okay.
Yeah, we did not have a relationship at that time. She just wanted to come, so I was like, okay, that's fine. And I didn't see her again after that for a couple years. Yeah, it was a
Oh
couple
wow.
years. Before I saw her again. And then yeah, I think after I moved out, well, I guess after she left, because she left when I was 17 when she got remarried, and started traveling around with her husband. So I think from there, from 17 on, I saw her maybe 5 times, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I've forgiven her. I mean, I know that what she was going through, she didn't understand either. So you
When
can't.
did you get? to that point of compassion?
Oh, that took a while. That was actually more recent. I would say, so she passed that COVID. She passed from COVID,
Oh
right
wow.
before the vaccines came out. And yeah, at that point, sorry,
No, it's okay.
at that point, I was like, okay, well, now it's time to really start focusing on forgiveness because I was so hurt, so
Hmm.
hurt. So yeah, it wasn't until she passed in what was COVID 2020, somewhere around there. And oh yeah, so that took some time. But we're there now. I'm there. Well, I'm there now.
So it was basically when she passed away that you wrestled with that afterwards then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and tell me if you don't want to talk about it, because if it's still fresh, I understand. But I was gonna ask you, did you, when she passed away, were you sad? Like, I know for this, and this may sound weird, but for me, I've wondered, I've talked to so many different people who've had a hard relationship with their parents, and they're like, I didn't feel anything. Or some people would be like, it was actually very relieving, or it just didn't feel actually any different than when they were there before. Um, like for you, was it a tangible loss because you missed the person? Or was it more of, grieving what you didn't have with her kind of thing?
I would say it was definitely grieving what I didn't have with her. You
Yeah.
know, I had so many, and I still have so many unanswered questions.
Yeah.
And and knowing that the struggles that she went through and understanding that now makes my heart hurt for her. And, knowing the kind of child I was, not understanding, makes me feel bad about how I was as a kid as well. Um, but yeah, I still have even today, I have a ton of questions. And
Yeah.
so when she passed, I was angry. Uh and yeah, I was angry, hurt, sad, a little bit of everything.
And how did how did the Lord meet you there?
With her passing.
Yeah, just I mean during that whole, like, not only are you grieving someone's death, but you're grieving your childhood. You've got all these emotions at once, which can be very overwhelming
Yeah.
and, lead people to be depressed and, kind of rightly so, to feel really alone and isolated. Um, how did you work with the Lord through that? Because, the temptation always is to just go, God, this is too hard. Bye. I
Yeah.
cannot, don't understand why you would give this to me as my lot to deal with after my beginning has been so difficult. Um, how did you wrestle with the Lord through that?
So that was prayer. That was just
Mm,
prayer and talk daily with the Lord. And I think, doing that, I can get through anything.
yeah.
And so when it came to that, that was the thing I needed to do. I needed to go to my Bible, I needed to go to my floor, and I needed to pray and
Yeah.
cry and get it all out. And that is, I'd say, the ultimate therapy is to getting it out. And of course I talked with my husband all the time. He's a great listener. So I'm like, I just need you to listen. You're not fixing anything.
Yeah.
Just listen. Because men, they want
I
to fix
understand. Yeah.
it. I'm like, I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to let me vent. And so we went through that and then like I said, lots of prayer and I you just come to understand that God has a purpose for everything and everything glorifies him at the end. And as long as it glorifies him, then we're good to go. And so if what I went through with my mother takes me to better a life to glorify him through others and through what I
Mm.
do, then let's do it.
It reminds me of that verse in the Bible that talks about how, by my God, I can leap over a wall. I don't remember what psalm that is, but it's like you can do anything by the power of God.
Yes.
Nothing's impossible to get through or experience, which is a huge gift.
Hmm.
Um, but it's interesting because when you were talking about being an executive earlier, it kind of comes full circle because you are. You're just not really the same way. I guess the fancy way of high heels and, in a New York office somewhere, but you are an executive actually ministering to the people that were you when you were a kid.
I did get to the executive level though in the federal sector.
Okay, so look at that. All right, never mind. Hot dog. You
I
actually
did,
did.
and I just quit the federal sector a year and a half ago,
It must
to
have
be
felt.
BetterALife full time.
What did that first day feel like being a like executive like those ladies?
It was fabulous. It was
Yeah.
fabulous. It was a lot of work. You don't stop working. The executives don't stop working. Everybody's like, oh no, they're golfing, they're at lunches. No, you are working, 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 and especially at night, you're working and yeah, going over everything that everybody did during the day, during their work. Now you're checking it all at night. It was just constant work, but it was great. I loved it.
Did you get to purchase like a really nice coat or something?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I got my dream car and I did do a bit of spending that I shouldn't have done. And but it was fine. I mean, I was like, well, if I can, why not try and have a few things. So I got my clothes. So
Yeah.
my closet is literally color organized. Everything.
Wow.
Yeah, so I know which color section I wanted to go to that day. If it was a power color, I was in red. If it was a calmer day, I was in blue. If it was just I was meeting with the generals for a board meeting, it was black, black or black and red. And yeah, so everything's color coded.
Have you ever gone back to that 7-Eleven as an executive and seen
So
anyone from there?
yes, I actually, so I'm in
Wow.
Reston every Wednesday, feeding people now in Reston. So we're there weekly. And so, yeah, occasionally I will swing by there and I will go in and I'll grab a hot cocoa because that's what I drank as a kid. And 7-Eleven is still there. It's still the same setup as a kid. It's crazy. It's kind of, I don't know. I don't know what that says about the 7-Eleven with the hot dogs being in the same space for that many years, but they're still there in the exact same spot as they were when I was a kid. So same with the nachos. Um, so I'm not sure what that says, but I do get a hot cocoa there once in a while.
Do you get a hot dog?
No.
No. Yeah.
No, I've had enough.
Yeah. What um what led you then to be full time with your
Better
ministry there?
life.
Yeah.
So it had been on my heart and my husband's heart for quite some time. And so it finally got to a point where I needed to keep the doors open 5 days a week. It was getting that busy.
Wow.
And so I had brought it up from nothing to six figures. And so I was like, okay, well, now that we're at the six-figure, donation income
Oh my
to give
goodness.
to give
Wow.
out, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, let's do this. And so we're like, well, we're at a good place financially to do this. And, he's an engineer, so he's still got his thing. It's like, let's go ahead. So we did.
So for you, what so life now will be full-time mom and doing this as well? Like do your
Yes.
kids get to come along with you and help or
Oh yeah, my kids love it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they love going door to door and coming to the homework club and they join the cooking class and yeah, they have a fun. I mean, they join the classes with the rest of the kids. So
Do you like it or does it feel different than not being an executive like you were before?
it is different, but I love it.
Hmm.
I do love it. I did the executive life. I got to where I wanted to be. Basically got the card and I'm like, okay, well, I don't need that anymore. I accomplished that. So now let me do God's work. Let me feed people, and so the programs that I created are based on how I grew up.
Yes. Yeah, I was gonna say too, like how did you said you started it from nothing. How did you start it? Like it was just an idea one day that you wanted to do this or
Mhm. Well, actually, it
um
was my husband's.
oh
Um,
wow.
yeah, so I've been volunteering, all over the place and um I've been, twirling with the, what do I do next? How do I volunteer more? How do, because I just felt like I couldn't do enough, and he's like, well, just do it on your own. And I'm like, well, yeah, okay. Sure, I can open a nonprofit. I'll figure that one out. So that's what I did. I sat there on my couch one day, I wrote out a business plan. I started reading this nonprofit Nolo book, which was humongous.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, let's do this.
Well, how would it's interesting. How would you encourage people? Because there are a lot of, especially believers, but also young people in general, right? They have these dreams. They want to be able to do something where they can start. And at least in the Christian community, I've seen a lot of reticence when it comes to these kind of things. It's like, well, I want to make sure, it's God's will, one. I kind of need to discern what that is, but then it takes a really long time to figure that out. And then there's this fear of trying because what if it doesn't work? There will be all these obstacles. Why should I even try? If the Lord wants me to do something, He'll bring it along. Um, what kind of, what's kind of the advice you can give, about kind of going out there and trying, see if it does work, whether it's going to be successful or not.
So he says we have to walk in faith,
Mm-hmm.
right? And too many people use the word, well, if it be your will, they use if a lot. And he doesn't use if in the Bible. He says it is his will. And he says, I will, if you seek, I will. If you knock, I will. If you, whatever
Yeah.
you do. And so we have to remember that he says he will. And we have to put our faith that, if this is what we feel is really on our heart, that God will either lead us through it or lead us away from it.
Yeah.
But if you don't take that faith step, right, that first step, you won't know. And so it's a matter of not being afraid of failure because it's not really failure. It's God closing the door and saying, I've got a better door for you.
Yeah.
And so we have to take that faith step. And it's hard. It's not easy. It's easier said than done. But if you truly feel in your heart, this is something like I did as a kid, I'm gonna be an executive, right? If you feel in your heart that you're called to be an executive, the businessmen keep the church open, right? They pay the tithes, right? So you're still an essential part of his work. And so many people think, well, I have to go into ministry to be a part. No, you don't. You can be
Mm-hmm.
in the business office and still be a part of ministry. And you can be a lawyer, you can be, a police officer, or whatever you want to be, and still be a
Yeah.
part of that ministry. So no job is too small to be a part of the kingdom. And it's just a matter
Well,
of taking that faith walk.
and you know, with the ladies too that you work with in prison as well, um, has it been for you easier to, because of all the experiences you've had, there's probably a lot to resonate with that it doesn't seem so unfamiliar or, foreign to you.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, that was when God put that on my heart, it was nothing that I had ever thought about doing ever. That was one place I never woke up and said, I want to go to jail. Never. God actually made me physically sick to show me that's where I was supposed to go.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I was a single mom at the time and I was going to work and as a single mom, I didn't take a day off ever.
Yeah.
And so I was going to work one morning, I went through the Greenway, went to the toll, and it was crazy because when I got to the toll booth, there's two rows, and an 18 wheeler was backing out of one side and a car was backing out the other, both simultaneously. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. There's nobody here except for these two cars backing out. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to get hit, So I went behind the little car and then I went past the car and went through and went to work. And instantly I got sick and I felt this guilt. And I was like, why didn't I pay for that man, to get through the Greenway toll?
Well,
And all I kept thinking was God says, you never know when you're entertaining an angel, right? When there's an angel around. And I was a newer Christian at the time as well.
mm,
So I had a lot of, did I do it right? Did I do it wrong? And so I started just getting this nausea and this anxiety in me. And I got to work and I got to my desk. I couldn't even drink a cup of coffee, and coffee is my life, trust me. There's one thing I need is coffee all day long. And I couldn't drink coffee. So I called my boss, into his office. I was like, dude, I'm sick. He's like, get out. Cause I'm never sick. So he's like, please leave. And And so I was like, okay, well, I couldn't go home because the babies were home with the nanny. I had my neighbor across the street. She would come over and watch the kids, and I let her bring her kids. And so we worked it out that way. And so I ended up getting an oil change with my car. And so I had my first dream car, my Mercedes at the time. And so I had to take it to the Mercedes dealer to get the synthetic oil change. And so I'm sitting there, and while I'm waiting for the oil change, I'm scrolling on my phone, and all I see is loud and abused women's shelter, jail, loud and abused women's shelter, jail. I'm like, where are all these ads coming from? And I was just sitting, I was like, God, what is going on? I was like, do you want me in jail? And instantly the sickness gone as soon as I asked. I said, "Do you want
Wow.
me in jail?" The sickness left. And the gas station coffee, yes, it tasted good. And I had some. Or the their coffee in there is not called gas station coffee, but um and so I that's how I started the going into the jails. And when I walked in, it is literally broken women. It's just broken women. They've been abused. They're getting sober, they're getting off drugs, they're lost, and they don't know where to go, who to ask, who to trust. They have no trust in the world, in themselves, in anything.
Yeah.
And you just see a point of your life where it is literally their worst point of their life. And
Yeah.
there's only one thing that got me through it. My worst point was God. So I just try to show that to them.
Wow.
Mhm.
I was gonna say too, I mean, it's not as extreme, but in some ways they're like your mom. These ladies that you're getting to minister to is that ladies who've been through the ringer with
Yeah.
personal events, and you getting to actually minister to them and get to show that care, um,
Yeah.
which is just really neat. It's so cool how the Lord's used your early years and tied it with all the things you're doing now. Um,
Mhm.
well, Elizabeth, it's been such a blessing to talk to you. I want to ask one more question. What attribute of God has become something that's not just a thought for you or something you hear, but an actual tangible reality, like you know it? Obviously, we can't ever know Christ as we desire until we see him face to face.
Mhm.
But some attributes of God seem more real to us than others because we've experienced them. What attribute of God do you think is the closest to your heart?
Oh goodness. That's a well, um, you know, I would just say his word.
Hmm.
Um, it's really hard to describe any of that except for the fact that his word is literally a living word. And, you know, everything about every piece of scripture, everything that is written walks your whole life out. So that's a hard one to say. I would just say the only thing I can say is his word. When he says, I was naked and you clothed me. I was in jail and you visited me. I was hungry and you fed me. He's speaking to us about him and reminding us that everybody is him. He is in everybody. We are his. So we have to help everybody.
Hmm. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much. And again, for listeners interested in knowing more, especially people locally, Better Life, you can actually look it up. Comes up pretty quickly if you type that
Yeah.
in Virginia. They have a website as well as information about when the food pantries open and opportunities with them. But Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time. This has been really encouraging.
It's been a blessing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.